Okay, so closing this chapter one up from a lecture perspective, PPPM, project and portfolio management, right? So we want to make sure there's alignment. So the portfolio management team is tied up in the C suite, right? We want to make sure that our project is aligned with them and aligned with the business strategy. So there will be functions like the PMO, the project management office, right? They are a stakeholder. Remember, we defined a stakeholder as any individual, group, or organization that is affected by or may affect the project, both positively and negatively. So they're going to give us a lot if you have a PMO. They should be giving you governance and policies and methodologies and templates. They will assign the project manager when the project is selected. There are actually various levels of PMO, but in general, they all do kind of these things. Some are more engaged, some are less. It will depend, but these are the things that we should expect from them. Now, portfolio itself, so we have on the right this strategy, right, which is what the business documents in the C-suite, they were trying to grab a sense of the company strategy and how it relates to our project, defining the business need, right? And so this PMO director or leader VP would have been a part of that interaction. And under the PMO, they have, notice on the far left, portfolio, which is all about governance, right? A portfolio is about governance, about communications and risk and design, things like that. Now, a portfolio can have ops, which is not a project. Operations is day-to-day activities. Yes, things will happen. Yes, you might need something fixed. It seemed like a small project, but it's not. It's operations, right? And then it might have a portfolio might have a major project under it, a big one, like maybe tens of millions of dollars, so big that it would have to be watched in a portfolio. Or it could have a program. Now notice the far right. A program are all related projects. Those are related projects. So there might be an individual project that sits by itself, like at the very top under the PMO. That's a massive project. Or you might have a program which has related projects to it. And you see those definitions on the left. Portfolio, program, and then project. Notice project, we said, was temporary and unique. Those are the key words. There's a beginning and an end date to a project, and it is unique. A unique deliverable is what I'm talking about. And a deliverable, by definition, is a product, result, or capability to perform a service, right? So you might consider those definitions when writing your paper in week 3. Of course, you'll start doing some of that reading and research on the Panama Canal earlier, as I provide at least one document this week. Very interesting. Okay. If a portfolio is misaligned, there are symptoms, and that's really what this slide is about. That maybe there are projects that are competing with each other, right? Which would not be intended. Or maybe the costs exceed the benefits on a project, right? Maybe risk analysis isn't being done. These would be problems that the portfolio management function should grasp and work to resolve, right? And so the processes are to identify non-projects and to prioritize the projects, right? You'll have to make resource decisions up at that level, and you want to prioritize your project, and you want to limit the number of projects if that's possible, and identify the real options for each project. What's a good fit? What are codependent projects? You might even look to eliminate risky projects, right? Just because the business need was identified doesn't mean that it has to go forward, right? It could be too risky. That may be one of your conclusions in the Panama Canal paper, part 1, right? But I'll let you assess that for yourself, right? You want to keep from overloading the organization, right? If you're running at 100 miles an hour, and that's top speed, then you're going to miss things anyhow, right? So you're looking for a balance. to balance returns, both short, long, and medium returns, right? They often consider developing a project council to help in recommendations towards decision making, right? It also is useful in my experience to define categories and criteria. When you can categorize things into groups or buckets, it's easier to do, right? Might be a bucket of issues with the rain in the Panama Canal. And there's a bucket of issues that are going to share risk responses and mitigation strategies and requirements even, right? You want to reduce, you want to prioritize your projects within these categories and even implement processes. I use a process engineer all the time, or a team of them actually, that ensure this. We talked about earlier, value mapping, value stream mapping, value engineering, sometimes it's called, right? How do we reduce cost without impact to the scope of the work that we're trying to accomplish, right? So if you do establish a council, you might do this. It might be composed of senior management. You might have the project managers of the major projects, or even on your Panama Canal project, you might recommend sub-project managers to the project manager. Or you might recommend a program manager to a multiple project managers, right? One digging the canal, one working on health care and living facilities, etc. You think it through, do what you want. There aren't any right answers. It's about assessing all the possible answers and integrating them. That's what we're trying to do, right? Okay, and so establish that general council, and then you might want to identify project categories, right? Like I said, you want to break this into phases and pieces. What phases on the Panama Canal might we have run to improve the effort of the first endeavor? And then you'll want to always collect project data. We call this work performance data. Whenever we're executing a project, we are collecting data, work performance data. So we want to assemble the data and see what it looks like to us. We want to establish how the data ensures our controls are being met, right? We give a high mark and a low water mark, and is the data falling within that, right? We want to document assumptions, because assumptions, by its very nature, its definition is assumed true without proof. So an assumption automatically, to me, goes on the risk register, the list of risks that I'm going to track, because I've assumed it's true. I didn't say it was true, right? And so some of those things can go on. Another step you might involve is resource availability, right? If I have two engineers on the entire project, they both can't be at the same place. Yes, they can both be at the same place at the same time, but they're limited to where they can be. All right, so they might be needed at several places at once, but with only two of them, they would be limited. So if there's two and they have 4 sites to be at, right, it's an impossibility. How can we manage our schedule to accommodate resources, and how can we moderate our budget to accommodate more resources of the skill level that we need? In fact, that's another excellent point. What skill level do you need? Not everything is the same skill level. So there are supervisors, there are workers, there's junior workers and experienced workers, and everybody costs a different rate. So that'll impact the schedule, it'll impact resource availability, it'll impact your budget. It's about integrating all these concepts in that iron triangle and making them work, right? And then we want to assess the project criteria, right? So we want to be aware of the organizational goals, the strategic goals. We want to make sure we have the right competence in our equipment and personnel. We want to make sure that we have a market to sell what we're offering. And of course, the Panama Canal certainly did. We proved that, or the British proved that with the Suez Canal project, right? We want to assess the risk. And you'd say to yourself, how did they assess risk on the Panama Canal project? Or was it done? I don't know. You tell me. Actually, I know. But you tell me, because it's a good exercise. What potential partners might we have brought on? Did we have the right resources, and were they a good fit? What are the strengths or synergies, and etc.? So those are great criteria to consider, right? And then we want to make sure that we've even prioritized not just our projects, but the requirements then within the projects, right? And we could even use a weighted criteria if we chose to do that. You want to make sure your project is funded and that some funds are held in reserves for risks or contingencies. It's called contingency reserves, and we'll address that later on in the course in risk management. Then step 8 is implementing the processes in the project as they relate to your community, and also implementing continuous process improvement, right? And you want to repeat these regularly. These are iterative steps. Okay, that is chapter 1, part of chapter 1, but mostly chapter 2, and enough overview for this week for the discussion questions to begin to read and assess your Panama Canal. There's a lot of reading just on the website this week because I like to start, we have to treat this course like a project. And to do so, we have to begin, as Steve Covey says, with the end in mind. So we begin with the end in mind by looking at what is success, right? Success includes the course project, a presentation of it, short 5 minutes at the end of the course, etc. So there you go. All right, thank you guys. See you online.